So, Jeff, what are the best ways to avoid risks in this? We'll probably wrap up the show with this.
Yeah, so we'll tell the story. And
Yeah.
actually, this is a story that you and I did on our Deals A to Z podcast.
Yeah.
This was a very advanced seller or investor technique.
Yep.
He bought on seller financing.
Yep.
There was a mortgage and a second mortgage that he wrapped when he bought it.
Right.
He then sold it seller financing, so he was in a seller financing sandwich, not just a lease option sandwich, but a seller financing sandwich.
I remember him, yeah.
And he had a small loan to do the rehab.
Yeah.
So then he wrapped essentially 3 underlying mortgages to his retail buyer.
Right.
So now there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
Now you have to understand that in these sandwich situations, you not just double, you actually triple the amount of problems that can arise.
Right.
Because there's things with your seller, that mortgage, what happens to those sellers? Do they disappear? Do they die? What happens if sellers die?
Yeah.
What if the sellers one day then, get really bad financially and have to file bankruptcy?
Right.
And so all these could pull from the seller perspective, pull the house into some conflict.
Yeah.
The investor, something can happen to the investor.
Yep.
And something can happen to your final buyers.
Right.
They may lose their job and so you just have a lot of issues. So what happened though, and even though we structured it was all done correctly, we were using a local escrow company to handle the payments.
Yes.
So the buyers, the final, the tenants, buyers in the house, were making their payments perfectly.
Right.
To this escrow company.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first year, the escrow company was making payments to all the underlying mortgages and sending the money the way it was supposed to. All get set on, all was good.
Yeah.
Then suddenly the escrow company stopped paying the underlying mortgage. The buyers were still making their payments.
Yeah.
So the escrow company had the money in the account to pay the underlying mortgage.
Yes.
And just stopped. And that money just kept building up and building up.
Right.
It was definitely a mistake on the escrow company's part. There's just no way that anyone would say, oh yeah, stop paying the underlying mortgage. I mean, that's absurd.
Yeah.
Right? And it was 5 or 6 months before the investor found out.
Right.
But by that time, the way the investor found out was the bank, the loan went into default.
Yeah.
So the bank looked up, started researching this mortgage and this property and saw that it had sold.
Uh-huh.
So not only did it go into default, not only did it ding the seller's credit, which damages the sellers.
Right.
But now they're calling the note due.
Yeah.
So you can't just bring it out of default, which normally you can do.
Right.
Bring it out of default and keep going.
Yeah.
It was too late. The bank said, no, we don't want to bring it out of default. We are going to call the note due. We want payment in 30 days. The buyers that gave them 30 days to buy a house and they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so huge mess.
Yeah.
And the way you saw that, and the way kind of when I talk about this experience is don't rely on third parties.
Yeah.
Even though you hired a third party to process this transaction, which is still a good thing. I still recommend it to process it.
Yeah.
It's still safer.
Yes.
But you're still as the investor, you're sitting in the middle of this, and you need to pay attention. And I would be checking every single month.
Yes.
Did that underlying mortgage get made?
Right.
Is everybody happy? Is everything going exactly the way you're doing?
Right.
Because because the investor, especially in that situation, is the point person.
Yeah.
Everybody was suing him.
Yeah.
Right? The sellers were suing him and his buyers were suing
right.
him. Right? Even though it wasn't his fault at all.
Right. Exactly.
So, make sure you have good documents that are clear.
Yeah.
Make sure that the systems and processes to control because remember, this is what we said at the beginning. This is a situation whether you're going to be in a partnership with the seller long term after closing, which you're normally not.
Right. Exactly.
You can't just buy it and forget. Right. You have to understand what happens if the seller dies.
Yeah.
What happens if the note is called due?
Right.
What happens when you go to, say, maybe actually pay off the underlying mortgage?
Yeah.
And the sellers have disappeared and you can't get a payoff request. You can't talk to the bank to get a payoff so you can pay it off. And you can't find the sellers because they've skipped town.
Or passed away.
Yeah. So there's long-term issues because you're in this partnership.
Yep.
For a long time that you have to think about and understanding what those are in advance.
Yeah.
And coming up with solutions is going to greatly reduce the issues down the road.
So smart. And just for the listeners, this seller, this middle guy, this investor, you know, when Jeff talks about checking every month, you can log online and
Yeah.
check to see if it happened. You don't
Yeah.
have to sit on hold or
Yeah,
anything.
most banks,
Yeah.
you know, except for the smaller ones, but most banks have an online portal.
Right.
And you can get access, you can go to the sellers, you're like, well, I don't want to give you my password.
Right.
Just change the password
Yeah.
to one you both know.
Right, exactly.
Which is fine. You can set up dedicated bank accounts that
Yeah.
you both have access to that don't do anything else. You don't
Right.
have to money. And then you can track in the bank account, is it happening? Is it happening at the bank? You can call the escrow company, confirm
Yeah.
with them that it's happening.
Yeah.
So there's checks and balances. You just have to do them.
Exactly, yeah. And just going back to one more kind of point here, you know, we've been talking about a lot of investors because investors tend to be the ones that just know how to do this because they put the investment in to learn how to do it. But I know somebody who bought their dream home. They're not an investor, just bought their dream home and are living there happily ever after on seller financing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There are retail buyers, and there are good agents out there too who understand this. They
I
can help
agree.
their buyers and sellers in these kinds of transactions.
Yep.
So yeah, there are buyers that normally couldn't qualify for a loan, but
Yep.
can get into a house, and a seller can sell a house that they couldn't otherwise sell. So
Exactly.
but it is about understanding these kinds of transactions and protecting both parties.
Right.
I really, even when I work with the buyers, you know, my investor clients who are generally the buyers in the
Yeah.
situation, you know, and I'm certainly trying to protect them, but I'm like, guys, you got to protect your sellers.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Don't forget them, because if something happens to them, it is going to affect you.
Right, right.
You're
It's
going to get
true.
pulled into it. So
It's so true.
do everything you have to explain and protect your sellers as well. And if everybody really understands the deal,
Yeah.
everybody's got the protections that they really deserve,
Yeah.
these things work absolutely fantastically.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, Jeff, we're at the end of our show. I want to thank you
Oh.
so much for joining
Thank
me
you
today.
for having me. Love always being on your show.
Love it. Love having you on my show. All right, guys. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed today's show. Again, Jeff, really quickly,
Yes, sir.
what's your website again that people can register for the class?
REIMasteryU.com, and that's letter U.
Yep. REI, Real Estate Investing, Mastery, and then U as in university. REIMasteryU.com. If this is something that you want to learn, maybe pick up your dream home or become an investor to utilize this strategy, definitely check out Jeff's seminar that he's got coming up in September. And on that note, I hope everybody has a spectacular rest of the day.